welcome everyone to another exciting episode of Writing Through the Unknown. If you have been following along, you'll recognize my guest tonight. I am so blessed and honored to have her back on the show. And even with the timing of we get to promote a very special event for her as well. And so I am going to turn it over to Dr. Kathleen Ball to share with us what she's going to bring us.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael. It's good to be back. Well, I was just mentioning to you a few moments ago, I have been researching the Templars for many, many years. My research goes clear back to the early 2000s. And, it began with a figure that I had actually researched during my the time in my life that I was very involved in art. In fact, when I was 16, I started researching Leonardo da Vinci. And I have now found connections with the Templars and Leonardo da Vinci. And I've also found connections with the Templars and some of my other older research with Lemuria and some of those cultures, Atlantean cultures and Lemurian cultures. And so I'm really excited about this, where it's heading. And I'm going to be talking about this. Well, I am actually talking about this in my new book, which hopefully will be out in January. I've got more research to do. I'll be over in Austria and France and the UK and back in Portugal in October. So I'll be hopefully finishing, there's always more to write, so I have to decide when I'm going to stop, with this particular book and wait for another one, to do the rest. But I'm so excited about this, where we're heading with this. And what I've discovered is that the Templars between 1040 and 1090, before they ever became organized as what was known as the Knights Templar, what we have referred to as the Knights Templar, they were traveling into Greece and they were digging up old, ancient, esoteric belief systems. They later went into Constantinople. They were in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, as early as 1090, from what I can see. And I'm also going to be doing some more research there. There's a couple of castles that they actually inhabited, and I'm not sure they constructed them, but they definitely inhabited them while they were there. So I'm going to be over there doing that. Now, when I was in Turkey the last time, in 2018, I believe, in Derinkuyu, I noticed Templar crosses there. And what it turns out, that some of the early, what we called Christians, which was not even a word back then, had escaped the Holy Land and gone into Turkey. And we're now thinking that the cross that the Templars later adopted was derived from some of these early Gnostic groups. So that I found evidence of in Derinkuyu. And also a Templar cross, interestingly enough, in Istanbul as well. So I've been sent photos of Templar crosses from all over the world. I mean, it's just fascinating. So what I now am absolutely certain of is that they were doing the same research that I have been doing for these last 35 years, which is to dig into these ancient esoteric belief systems and try to find out, what was the agenda of these people. And so what it's starting to look more and more like is that in Lemuria, during the Lemurian times, because we don't have any concrete evidence of any of this other than symbols that they left that so far undecipherable. No one's been able to, translate these symbols. But what I'm getting from books that I've read, James Churchward and others, Madame Blavatsky and several other, mystical writers, is that Lemurian culture preceded Atlantis, at the Atlantean culture. And that's why we see so many of the indigenous cultures in Hawaii and along the coast in Tamil Nadu in India. And also we have in the Chumash on the California coast, many of the same symbols. And within these cultures, there is that connects all of these, and the Polynesian islands too, by the way, there is the connecting beliefs in interrelationship with nature. So they were not technologically advanced in the way that we understand today in terms of machinery and all this sorts of stuff. They were well versed in crystals, technology having to do with energy systems that derive their power from the planet. And so now what I'm starting to see, and especially, that we've uncovered recently, well, not recently, but it's really coming out to the world now, the underground tunnel systems and whatnot in the Giza Plateau. And, for a long time, of course, Chris Dunn has introduced this many, many years ago. We believe that the temple systems and the pyramids in Egypt were used as energy, as generators for energy. So I am definitely believing now that many of these cultures stemmed from the early Lemurian cultures. That if you believe in the Pangea, which I happen to be a believer of, theory that the continent was at one time all one, and there may have been islands and things around that, but it split apart as the tectonic plates began to shift, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why we see, so many of these indigenous cultures with the same belief systems and the same ideologies, et cetera, et cetera. So fast forward to today. So we're going through much of the same temperature shifts and ranges that we're dealing with, these massive heat waves, and then we're having floods, and we're having earthquakes, and we're having tornadoes in California on the coast, which is totally bizarre. All these things are happening, but we believe that these things happened before, that they preceded a cataclysmic event that humans survived from, but that was pretty devastating, enough to bring the current civilization, whatever that was, and whatever like what we have now, to their knees, and to the point where we had to recreate something else out of the ashes of that. And we believe that this is what happened after the last cataclysm. And we created basically a patriarchal system, which was different from what we had in the past. So what we are embarking on now, and many of the Templars believe this, including Timothy Hogan, who is the Grand Master of the Templars and a friend of mine. We have discussed this at length. And what we believe is happening now is that we're going to go through something very similar. And instead of picking up where we left off with the patriarchal systems and many of the technological advances, derived from petroleum products, et cetera, that we're going to move back towards basically sort of a reunification with some of our older beliefs that go along with Lemurian cultures and some of the indigenous cultures that still carry these beliefs. So that is what many of the Cathars and several of the Gnostic groups believe, that this was a time, and also Leonardo da Vinci, by the way. There's every indication that he saw into this future time in history. And I believe that I actually did a painting of this, which is behind me. I don't know if you can see it, but anyway, it doesn't matter. I believe that there's more notes, that Leonardo da Vinci actually has more notes that will be uncovered, that will talk about this, that were so far advanced that, he would have been burned at the stake if they'd been discovered during his time. But anyway, I recently found out, I was in France last year, and I discovered that Leonardo da Vinci's chateau that was near the castle in France that King Francis I built for him is about, I think it's less than 2 kilometers away from the St. John the Baptist Church. That was a Templar church that was functioning during his time, which is interesting because it was after 1307 and after the suppression of the Templars in France. So I've done a little history on this church, and I'm going back into France to try to get into the interior of the building itself and talk with some of the people that that are running it now, because it's only open one day a year, or 1 week during the year. So anyway, there's lots of things that I've been uncovering that lead me to believe that the Templars were carrying this light, this belief in light. They were called a certain masters of the light. I can't remember the exact term, but they were carrying forward these same beliefs that were practiced during the Lemurian and Atlantean times, and that they were carrying and keeping these secrets safe. Now, Scott Wolter is going to be disclosing, if he hasn't already. I'm going down to a lecture next month in Southern California, where he and Timothy are going to be speaking. And Scott's going to be opening up the Cremona documents, which talk about the same thing that I'm talking about right now. Evidence of the Templars having possession of very, very ancient esoteric belief systems. And why they had this in their possession, I believe, was to keep it safeguarded from what we, of course, all know was the Catholic Church at that time, who had all power, who had all power. I mean, nobody did anything without the blessing of the Catholic Church at that time, which is why the Templars were actually, they walked through that whole procedure with Bernard de Clairvaux, who presented them to the Catholic Church to get the church's approval so that they could function. So they were always riding this very, very thin line of appeasing the Catholic Church, and at the same time continuing to do their own research and moving their own agenda forward, which I believe, which is in my book that I'm working on now, which is what I believe was to create not just a country in Portugal, a sovereign nation where people lived in harmony and tolerance of one another, religious freedom, economic freedom, cultural freedom. They accomplished this in Portugal, and I believe that they wanted to spread this out through the world. They wanted this to spread through the world. And I think that this is still their agenda. And they're not alone in that. There are numerous organizations at this point in time. I recently did my second film came out, by the way. It premiered in Sedona, and it is Cave Mysteries and Amazon Miracles, and it's going to be out. We just uploaded it to Film Hub 2 weeks ago, so it should be out on national television any day. In fact, it could even be out today. I don't know. I haven't checked it today. But anyway, while I was in Sedona and I did a lecture there, I had several people come up to me. This happens when I do lectures, and I love this about that process happens. I get people that come up to me, and I was invited to a dinner party after the lecture, and we got into this very deep conversation about the connections of the Templars and the indigenous cultures, because I also found out that the indigenous culture in the Amazon jungle were the people that led the Templars into Alto Paraíso from the coast and Bahia of Brazil. So this is how they got into central Brazil. So they had to have had a compatible relationship with these people. And the same thing is true in Northern California when the Templars came into Northern California. And again, Scott Wolter and Timothy Hogan talked at great lengths about this, that there were handshakes and there were commonalities in their cultures and their spiritual belief systems so that they were compatible. And instead of the indigenous cultures seeing them as enemies, they saw them as friends and assisted them in whatever their agenda was at the time. So, you know, given this this background and all these things that are opening up, I mean, I just am absolutely convinced that the Templars were and are involved with other esoteric organizations at this time to bring about a time of a higher frequency of consciousness amongst the masses. And I'm really excited about this because now this coincides with what I experienced in my near-death experience in 1990, 35 years ago. So I'm like full circle. I have returned full circle to what woke me up to all of these esoteric spiritual beliefs, and you know, that there was a deeper meaning in life, which I always suspected, but when I had the near-death experience, I got to see it, I got to experience it, and I committed myself at that point in time to providing a platform for that to take place at some time in the future. Now, when I had that near-death experience, I thought that that might be hundreds of years from now. I'm starting to believe that it's not going to be that far in our future. I now believe that it could be something that I may even see in my lifetime. So, you know, here we are.
And I have an interesting question for you, because listening to your, you know, what you're going through, I started to think about, you know, the quote Templar treasure that everybody's looking for.
Right.
And I can't help thinking what you're uncovering and their connections and everything, that's the true treasure.
Yes.
And the money is like the distraction. So the people who are not really ready will go hunt that, while the people who are meant to will follow like your path and find the wisdom and be like, that's the riches.
Yes. Yes. And, you know, I'm also, I also understand that the Templars, when they did go underground in 1307, they were still involved, because you have to understand that the Templars were embedded in every single one of the monarchies throughout Europe. Every single one. I found evidence of them in every single monarchy. They were involved deeply. Not only that, but they're involved in, you know, they lived in the countries and they advanced animal husbandry and herb, you know, the study of herbs as medicine, et cetera, et cetera. You see this every single country in Europe. So they didn't just go away. You know, they didn't just disappear, because they were valuable assets to the kings in these countries. They used them as bankers, as advisors, as mediators. They were involved in everything because of their discipline and their own spiritual practices, which made them very wise. You know, they were very wise individuals, at least the core. I'm not talking about the soldiers. I'm not talking about the periphery in the Templars. I'm talking about the core administrators and, you know, the core members of the Templars. And so what the evidence that I've uncovered is that many of them were going back and forth between Portugal and the UK, Scotland specifically, and that they were involved in the Holy Wars. They were amongst the members of the soldiers that fought with Robert the Bruce, and they were also involved. I see absolute evidence that they were involved in the Magna Carta, which was later, as we know, used as a foundation for the creation of the United States of America. We see these same principles in our Bill of Rights, in our Declaration of Independence. So this might come as a surprise, but there is a great deal of evidence that the treasure, that so-called Oak Island treasure, was long ago uncovered and used for the War of Independence. There is no treasure there. The treasure is what you were saying. The treasure is the wisdom that they carry, the esoteric light that they carry forward. And also they do have possession of several of the Arks of the Covenant. There were 10 supposedly in all. And the Templars right now have possession, I think it's 7 or 8 of them. So these are intended to be used in a future time when we will be able to reactivate the earth and its, energy generators throughout Egypt. And I mean, they're all over. I have seen pyramids all over. I've seen them in South America, in North America, in Egypt, in Bosnia. I mean, I have been all over this globe and I've seen them everywhere. So there's reason to believe that these energy generators are all over. And the arcs were used to amplify energy. Timothy Hawkins, he expresses this really, really well in his talks. In fact, I encourage you to try to get a hold of him as a guest speaker because he's phenomenal. He really he talks about the alchemic aspect of the Templars and of what we're talking about right now, these belief systems. And he also talks about the connection with the alchemical process, and the Arks of the Covenant. So, this is really vital. This is really important because our ancient belief systems in Lemuria and, of course, in Atlantis were practicing alchemy. I mean, this was a natural thing. This was something that they did just like you and I breathe. They were involved in this. They were involved in keeping the vibration of the planet very high. We have actually devolved. I mean, if you look at the Hindu system of belief, I've studied all of it. But if you look at the Hindu system, we are just now coming out of what's known as the Kali Yuga. We're moving into the Dwapara Yuga, eventually into the Satya Yuga, which is an ascending process. But for the last, 36,000, possibly more years, depending on who you talk to as in terms of the lengths of the Yuga eras, how long they last, we have been in what's known as a descending Yuga, the Kali Yuga, very material, very dense. And it is also the vibrational frequency of the planet has gotten denser. Everything that you see around you. I mean, this cup is vibrating at a lower frequency than maybe my hand or that a glass of water would. And everything that exists is as a result of the frequency at which it vibrates. That determines the density of whatever it is, you see. So when we are vibrating at a higher frequency, we are less dense. Do you see what I mean?
I do, and I'm wondering, because we talk about becoming in an age of awakening or enlightenment, however you want to call it.
Yeah.
The Great Awakening. Is it, in your thoughts, reason why all of a sudden, we had how many decades or possibly even centuries where Knights Templars just weren't talked about? They were like, unless you were in like a certain niche, nobody knew about them. But now all of a sudden, since what was it, the 1990s or 80s, everyone's like, ooh, Templars. We got to research the Templars. The Templars are resurging. Do you think it's a sign of the shit that we're going to be rising back up? Or
yes,
what's your thoughts of why now they're resurging?
There's no accident. And, like I said, it's not only the Templars, the Cathars are actually, they have more numbers now than they ever have, even than they did before. And the Templars, it's the same thing. Of course, we're seeing a lot of less authentic groups popping up as well, but that happens. That always happens. I mean, during the time of the Templars that we are familiar with, the 12th to the 14th century, there were also peripheral members that were probably not as ethical, as maybe the core members were. So, so that happens. You can take any group. I don't care. You give me the Boy Scouts, give me the Brownies. I don't care who you give me. You're going to find bad apples or people that are really not on board with the agenda of the group, the essence of the group, whatever it is. So, but yes, right now we have more Templars than we ever have had. It's popping up. The interest for the Templars has expanded exponentially. And I think that this has to do with our collective consciousness, because there is such a thing as a collective consciousness. It's like I practiced this with Greg Braden for years in the early 90s because he was writing what my research, what I was uncovering about as fast as he was researching the same stuff. Exactly. How did that happen? We never talked, we never connected. Years later, I knew his girlfriend and later met him, but we weren't talking on the phone. We weren't, but we were talking about the same stuff. I was lecturing about it. He was writing books about it. And, and I've seen this happen. It's like when oftentimes, and you can test this, go into a store where there's a lot of people and look at something and really think about buying it and really get involved in it and walk away and watch how many people go over to that same thing. It's in the consciousness. I mean, we share consciousness. So right now, in this current time in history that we are living in right now, there is a tremendous resurgence of people who are interested in these esoteric belief systems. They want to know more. They want to know about the Templars. They want to know why they existed. They want to know what their agenda was. They want to understand what they understood. They're on board. And also, everybody's looking for something different. We're tired of big oil running the show. We're really done. I mean, people are really exhausted and they're worn out from this stuff. I look at the faces as people as I'm always gathering research, always, every day of my life. And I see people they just look downtrodden and stressed out and fearful and angry and frustrated. And it's just getting worse. It's not getting better. So I believe that pressure in itself is going to bring about, a collapse of what we have co-created on this planet in the last, maybe 20,000. I don't know how many years you want to talk about since the last cataclysm. So we're going back, 12,000 years. What we have co-created on this planet. And it's turned into something that not many people, that the majority of the people don't want to be involved in anymore. The people at the top, the elites that seem to be benefiting from it, seem to be the only ones that are really on board 100% with what's going on around us in this world today. So the Templars are a big part of this. People are fascinated with them because of their self-discipline. They were known for their self-discipline and their ability. They knew themselves so well. They practiced the Gnostic beliefs. They were the epitome of the Gnostic beliefs, of what the Gnostics carried forward. And by the way, the Gnostic beliefs stemmed from Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and the early followers of what was not called Christianity. I really have to drive that point home because it was not Christianity. It was just simply a belief system that John the Baptist brought forward And John the Baptist was just bringing this belief system forward from early Sumerian and Atlantean and Lemurian times anyway. So he was rebirthing something, right, that the Templars latched onto and brought forward. So these beliefs have always been brought forward by some group. It's always managed to survive, even during the darkest hour of our lifetime here on Earth during this Kali Yuga. The Templars latched onto it. They had hoped to, to create this renaissance that we hear, that I see them discuss and mention in these ancient texts that Scott's got. But they weren't able to accomplish that during that time. And I think that they knew that. And this is why all the travel that they took to South America, to India, there's a lot of evidence of them having been in India, in Egypt, in Turkey, all throughout Europe, Northern California. And now I'm getting people that are even telling me they're finding Templar crosses in Australia. So, which wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me at all. They had the possession of the Phoenician maps. They had the money. They had the time. They certainly had the members. They had enough people. And also, I did uncover that they had a port. They had a secret port in Peniche in Portugal, where they had 2 commanderies, and they had convents where they were teaching their members how to be sailors. They were teaching them nautical skills. So I think that they, as much as they wanted to bring it about in their time, they also could see the writing on the wall. The church was having none of it. It was not the time to do that. But they laid the groundwork for a later time. And that time is now.
And I'm kind of curious, and I don't know if you've come across this or not, but as enlightened and as seekers they were, is there any evidence of them coming into contact or researching into like what we call star beings or visitors from other worlds?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And again, Timothy talks about this. And we've shared a lot of research lately because, excuse me, I had been doing all my research by myself. I had been uncovering these things. And after meeting with him, he corroborated everything that I had discovered. Even things that it was just theory for me that I hadn't found any evidence yet. So, yeah, I do believe that they were, if they were not in contact, they certainly were aware of, and I think they understood that we have been contacted by other beings. And I mean, they were worldly. They were aware of a lot of things that the masses were not aware of. Excuse me, I'm recovering from this darn thing, and it's starting to bother me. But anyway, yeah, I think that there's no mention in any of the texts that I've come across, or that anyone I know has come across to date. But I don't see why not, because they were open-minded enough to embrace those beliefs. And I think that if they were presented with any evidence, I think they would have accepted it.
And one example I'm curious about is, I don't know if it's truly theirs or we just match it to them, is like in, I believe, is it Ethiopia, where they have the church that's in the shape of the cross built from the ground level down.
Yeah.
And to me, that seems like something as precisely shaped as it is, a little, I might be overstating this, but a little out of our league to create. And so I wonder, is that an example of them saying, look, we were helped and look at what we were able to build with help from other sources? Or do you think they really did know how to build that precisely in those sharp corners back then?
Oh,
Going
absolutely.
no.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, the Templars, their building skills again were derived from ancient texts. Many of which came from the Islamic people that they connected with, that they came into contact with, not only in the Holy Land, but also in Portugal, because they fought many of the Moors and Islamic forces in order to take over the territory of the Iberian Peninsula, which is now we understand it as Portugal and Spain. But the curious thing was, once they conquered and took these lands for their possession to call the country Portugal, they invited these people to stay. Now, I've run across graves, mass graves from these battles that they had, where Templars and Islamic members, soldiers, they're buried in the same burial grounds with altars, huge standing stones and altars that are dedicated to them both. So there's every indication that that the Templars were learning from their building skills and things that they were learning from Islam. Because you have to remember, the Islamic structures were based on sacred geometry, and they, amongst their members, were the Sufi, which is, again, an ancient spiritual group of people whose beliefs stemmed went all the way back to Lemurian and Atlantean cultures. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does, and it also raises another question of, we have like an example of the cross in that structure. Then we have the Tour Magdala, which is a totally different style structure. And then Rosalind Chapel is another different look. And I look at that and I'm wondering, like we say, there's the Camino Real or the Chakra Road. Could these structures be built to certain shapes and are encoded a certain message of, here's our path, and each one is built to represent, and we just are missing that piece of the puzzle of going, oh look, this structure would be this, and this is what's encoded in the architecture?
There was no accident where they used specific sacred geometrical understructures for every single one of the buildings, all of their churches, all of their chapels, every one of them. These principles, you'll find these architectural principles in them. And, everything, again, would get back to frequency. Everything on this planet, your breath, it doesn't matter what it is, has a frequency that emits a frequency, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, but we're receiving frequencies all the time. And so it stands to reason that these sacred geometrical forms we're also capable of emitting, once we are capable of tuning into them, sacred principles or whatever, that they are triggering us. I know that myself, having been in the Great Pyramid numerous occasions, I have had phenomenal spiritual experiences because of the sacred geometrical, and I believe it's directly because of those principles. Also, when I was in Rosalind Chapel, I had similar experiences there, and in chapels in Tomar in Portugal, the chapel that's dedicated to Mary Magdalene, Santa Maria do Orival, phenomenal spiritual experiences. And not only that, but it's almost like memories, it's almost like memories. Now, one of the things that's really interesting that I just recently uncovered is that one of the principles that the Lemurians believed that they were doing when they saw the fall of their civilization was to imprint within our DNA structure memory of that time frame, memory of the spiritual principles, memory of the culture, memory of the abilities that we had at that point in time, which were far superior to what we have in terms of today. In terms of, we have 5 senses. That's, so minute compared to our capability that this body that we have, that's been beautifully designed, is capable of. You see, and during the Lemurian times, we just lived it. That was our everyday life. So I believe that the purpose for many of, like in Shalt Cathedral and many of these other places that the Templars built, that the purpose of these buildings was to wake people up. In addition to the stained glass windows and the iconography and the symbol, all of it together was to, on some level, whether it was subconscious or whatever, to wake people up, gradually wake people up as we become less dense, because we've been coming out of the Kali Yuga for some time now. We are out of it now. But as we become less dense, we're more capable of taking in this esoteric transmission, these emissions that are coming out. And I think, they're embedded all over the world. They're all over the world. They're everywhere. I have experienced them everywhere. I'm very sensitive to energy now after having a near-death experience. I'm more sensitive than most, probably, but also because I exercise it. I believe in it. And so, I become more and more open instead of less. So, and I think this is not individual. I think this is happening with many people, NDE or not. I think, I've talked to people that say, gosh, my telepathic abilities have increased so much. I don't know what's going on. I think of somebody and they call me, or they show up at my door, or they show up in the grocery store. These kind of things are happening with people, and I'm hearing it from several people. So, yeah, we're moving into a different time,
I agree. And one thing I'm curious, as we talk about like our DNA being coded and the fact that we're more than 2 strands, but they say only 2 are activated, the rest is junk, which I'm like, if it's like you're saying, as sophisticated as we are, I don't see our creator going, well, we have these strands here. Let's just put them in here. Nobody will ever know. And they won't serve a purpose. But I'm wondering, like you're saying, if you go to these sites and you are in tune with the energy there, do you think that in a way is waking up the strands, and that's why we're getting less dense and our awareness is growing because we're activating more DNA?
Yes. Absolutely, yes. And I think that it's happening simultaneously because the planetary frequency is becoming less dense, it's becoming higher. So that is automatically going to cause it to be less dense. That is also happening with our bodies. Our bodies and the earth, the soil, dirt itself, resonates at the exact same frequency. Did you know that? 635 nanometers. In the nanometer, spectrum of frequency, we are the same as dirt. Exactly. So when something affects the planet in terms of becoming, frequencies getting higher and less density, it's happening with us as well. So that in itself is going to allow us to open up to these frequencies. And also, you touched on something. We have always known, or not always, but since the 50s when they discovered what the double helix looked like, 2 strands of DNA. But that is only when you consider the 3-dimensional body. And we are multi-dimensional beings. And as we embrace our multidimensional bodies more, we are going to expand our DNA structure. So that goes hand in hand. This is all happening. It's what's happening inside is also happening outside, is my point. So it's our evolutionary progression that's taking place. Even the fall of Lemurian Atlantis was part of our evolutionary process, because during the evolutionary time frame in Lemurian Atlantis, we had not developed our mental abilities. We had developed spiritually, emotionally, but we had not developed mentally. So we had to go through that period of Atlantean, the beginning of the Atlantean beliefs, and that whole time frame, and forward, which was considered a downward evolutionary path, but it was necessary for us to develop the brain. It was necessary, and my personal theory is that we began eating meat at that point, because the brain is protein, so we had to feed it somehow. And I think that's what, that advent, that's when we began eating meat. That's just my own personal theory. But anyway, with all this happening, now we've matured. The mental capacity of the brain has fully developed. So now we're moving back on an upward, ascending, yuga. And all of these things are happening simultaneously for the purpose of our evolutionary journey, collective on Earth. We're all going through it. I mean, at different levels. You don't see everybody at the same level, but this is the case always. It's always the case. Anthropology is always taught that, suddenly this happens. Well, suddenly it doesn't. Suddenly nothing happens. Collectively things happen, but they're staggered. They're not, boom, all of a sudden we are this or we are that. It's not the way it works. So, we are gradually, collectively moving on this path in an upward scale, and more people are going to become aware of their increased abilities, of their increased lightness, less dense. They're just going to be becoming more aware of these principles and abilities that will be increasing. And we see on the world stage, all this chaos and all this stuff that's just basically, I just see it as an attempt to distract us. But in reality, it's a dying off of an old paradigm that doesn't have a place in the world anymore. So it's that much more desperate to hang on to power and control. If you've ever watched, when I was a very young child, I used to play with bugs because my brothers weren't old enough to play with. And so I'd go in the backyard and I'd play with bugs. And I learned a lot from insects, watching insects. And at one point I saw a bee land on the ground, and it had stung somebody, apparently, as the stinger was missing, and it was spinning around. And as it got closer and closer to death, it spun faster and faster and faster, clinging until it just died. And that taught me a great deal about, how systems progress. And when they are at the end of their life, what happens? They're desperate. They're literally desperate for power and control, because they want to maintain the control and the power that they've always enjoyed. They want to maintain this system where the masses support them. The masses are the ones that do the work, that support their lifestyles, and they enjoy that, and they don't want to give it up. So with this fall taking place in this evolutionary shift, which they can't do anything about, this is a spiritual evolutionary path of mankind. There's not a damn thing they can do about it. But they don't know that, because a lot of them are not spiritually connected in the beginning, to begin with. So what they're doing is desperately trying to convince us that they're still in power and that they have all power. And the best thing that we can do is ignore it. don't give them any power. Don't give them any power. Just focus your attention on spiritual things or improving your own life. I do on TikTok, I do the lessons involved in beginning and functioning and maintaining your own Grail quest, which I believe, is the title of my book, and which I believe is everyone's possibility. I mean, everybody can do this, is step out onto their own Grail quest. Who was it? Joseph Campbell called it following your bliss. I refer to it as a Grail quest because of my Templar research mainly. But once you step out into your own path, you begin, yes, yeah, there you go. But you literally begin, to experience synchronicities that happen. I can't even tell you, or we could do a whole program just on the synchronicities that have happened in my life as a result of me stepping out into my own Grail quest. So when we do this, we align ourselves with the ascending yuga, with the energies of the ascending yuga. We open ourselves up to the possibilities, to other possibilities. We open our mind. We open ourselves up to the energies that are coming into the planet. And we're going to have a less rocky road than a lot of other people would have if we embrace our own destiny, our own path. The thing that is the biggest obstacle to doing this is fear. So we have to conquer fear. And these are tools. There are tools in what the Templars taught and in many esoteric belief systems right now, steps that you can take. I mean, you'll even find these in AA, the exact same steps that were in ancient belief systems are even in, that are even in AA. Our 12-step programs. You can do it through 12-step programs. But if you honestly and sincerely practice these, you will get rid of fear. You will be able to relinquish fear, and you will be able to embrace a faith in the future reality, and you'll be able to see things from a higher perspective. And I can't recommend this enough. I mean, I really just can't recommend it enough. That people step out, they get away from, the rat race of trying to pay off their house and this and that and all these materially based goals that we have had on the planet, because they're really going to become irrelevant. And I mean, you do need to have a home, and but you don't have to have a home. And you can sell your home and buy a camper and a truck and travel. I mean, so many people are working, they don't have to work. They're working from home. You can work from a computer, get yourself, what do you call it? Those Wi-Fi, I can't with that.
Hotspots.
Yeah. You take that with you, hotspot, and take that with you, travel. There's many, many things that you can do to unplug from this system that we have co-created, because it's crumbling, it's falling apart. As hard as they're trying to keep it together, it's not going to stay together. So what the smartest thing that we can do as individuals is to unplug. Little by little by little, we unplug. It doesn't have to happen overnight, but we set ourselves goals. And this is the Grail quest. This is it right here. The first step, becoming aware. Believing and understanding that there is something wrong with my life. Oh my God, I need to make changes. Okay, so what do? I meditate. I want to find out who I am. What is it? To know thyself is the beginning of the quest. And once you know yourself and you know what you really want out of life, then you start moving towards that. But there's basic principles that we have to embrace. Honesty is the big, big, big one. Honesty to ourselves. Letting go of addictions. We've got to let go of the addictions, because we place those in between the energy, the spiritual power, and they are actually blocking us from the sunlight of the spirit. Literally, they all have energy, and that energy will block us from the sunlight of the spirit. So, so we we embark on this. It's the same thing when you go through the Compostela, through that path, that trail that goes through Spain and Portugal. It's this basically same process. You're walking that, but you're going inside, you're contemplating, you're meditating, you're praying, you are thinking about what else there is in life. You've unplugged from the system when you embark on that. That's what you're doing. You're unplugging. And the more that we do this as individuals, the happier we're going to be, for one thing, but also we are one step closer to collectively creating something that we would rather live in.
All right. We're approaching the hour. Do you have time for a couple more questions, or?
What time is it? Yeah, I do. I have about 10 more minutes, 12 more minutes, actually. So.
Okay. Well, one question I have for you is, as we're talking about awareness and opening our minds, and I'm not sure if we talked about this on our first episode, but I want to bring it up because it's an awareness that I think people may be curious about, is the country Portugal. When you take in the name of it, it's Port au Graal, which means Port of the Grail. So is that meant to be like a first step place of, once you figure out what this place is, now your journey is beginning? Or what's the significance that they allowed that country to be named that way and it being right in front of us?
Right. Portugal is the port of the Grail meaning the people. And the people, not just Christian people, but people from all walks of life. In Portugal, Freddie Silva's book, he has a wonderful book. What's it called? Templar Country, or the 9 Nights started it originally. I can't remember the exact name of it. Freddie Silva, look him up. And it's about Portugal. It's about the creation of Portugal. He did tremendous research about this. And Portugal is the port of the people. They are the people. We are the Grail. We are the Grail. We have the ability to access the Grail within us and connect with the larger populace, the collective consciousness. And Portugal was a phenomenal experiment to be taking place during that time in history, when all the rest of the countries in Europe, in the continent, including, England, which, its own island, but were Catholic, Christian. Anybody of any other belief system was considered a heretic. Now, what the Templars did is they went in when the Cathars were being, they were being annihilated. They were attempted genocide by the Catholic Church. They brought the Cathars, they rescued the Cathars, many of them, hundreds of them that I found evidence of, and brought them into Portugal. When the Jews were being persecuted, same thing, brought them into Portugal. There are festivals in Portugal, in 2 different areas that I have witnessed, that I've experienced and participated in, where these festivals are dedicated to all of the cultures that brought about the existence of Portugal collectively. And you'll see Sufis, Jews, Islam, Moors, Christians, Cathars. You will see a multitude of medieval cultures that were involved in creating, and they were the foundation of Portugal. So The Catholic Church wanted more than anything to get into Portugal and annihilate. They wanted to stop this. And they finally did in the 1500, I think it was 1543 or something, when the Inquisition got into Portugal, and they went right into Tomar, and they implanted themselves in the castle, the Convento Cristo, which was the Templar stronghold. That was their headquarters in Portugal. And they went in and they just mass murdered people. They destroyed Templar artifacts. It was a mess. And ironically, they also did this in India at the same time. And they did this in South America in the 17th century, in 1600s, or late 1500s, late 16th century. And I found a book in the Rosicrucian Library that was written about this. Every chapter is about another country that the Jesuits went and hunted down any Templar descendants, Masons, and murdered entire families. So there was a strategic, organized attempt to wipe the Templars and any memory of them from the face of the earth by the Catholic Church. They did not want freedom of religion, cultural tolerance, spiritual tolerance, economic freedom. They did not want it. And so they made every attempt that they could to destroy that. But they didn't understand. These same people are running the world right now. They think they're running the world right now. And they don't understand that the spirit of consciousness, the evolutionary path of mankind, is far more powerful than they are ever going to be. So these things have survived, and they have bloomed even bigger now than they ever were.
So do you think that's why they kind of came to the Americas? Because we're starting to discover they were here, but they never really made their presence known. So was it kind of like a way where they could hide in plain sight?
Yes.
And were left alone to grow?
Yes. Yeah, they worked under the rug. Like I said, they were involved in the author. They co-authored or assisted in the Magna Carta, which again was the foundation of the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights here in the United States of America. They were very involved in the beginnings of the government and governance of the United States of America as it began to grow. And then, of course, you have the other side that comes in and overwhelms that. Because the Templars were underground and the Masons were underground, and they weren't above board. It was very difficult for most people to really see their involvement unless you do research, because it's censored. A lot of that information is censored. You're not going to see it on national television or even on movies and films and movies unless you go to YouTube now. I love the internet because we can tune into whatever we want. We can find it on YouTube, Netflix, whatever. We're finding. And Gaia is another one I highly recommend, the programming. But they're doing everything they can to shut us up. They're doing it again. It's the same thing. If you look at the members, this is really interesting. If you look at the members, the authors of this Project 2025 that they're trying to shove down our throats right now, several of the members are Opus Dei. Opus Dei is just another name for Jesuit priests that had this belief, ultra right-wing religion. Let's just call it that. Now, I had a personal experience with Opus Dei when I was in Portugal. I was researching a small church in Autuguia, which is adjacent to Peniche, when I was doing my research there about this port, this Templar port in Peniche, which turns out it was co-signed by all the kings of Portugal, and every one of the naval admirals lived in Peniche for hundreds of years. But anyway, I was researching Antigua, this church, and I had applied to the Office of Patrimony months before. And 2 weeks prior, I had gotten my permission to go in with my photographer and photograph in this church. Well, when I arrived, my photographer was all set up. We're all ready to go. We were going to do an interview and whatnot in the church. And in waltzes this man, no idea who he is. And he comes straight up to me and he says, "You can't photograph in this church." And I said, "On whose authority?" And he rattled off a bunch of baloney. I said, "Okay, you and I need to go outside and have a talk." And he just kind of went like that. But he went out with me and he gave me a whole bunch more bullshit. I said, "You and I both know that you're full of baloney." And basically is what I said to him. And I said, "You have given me no concrete evidence or reason why I can't photograph from this church. You're saying on your authority, but you're not disclosing who you are. Your supposed connection to the Office of Patrimony, but you're not producing any credentials. You know, I really don't have any reason to believe, you know, you could be just somebody off the street." He said, and he got really aggressive at that point. "You are not allowed to photograph in this church." And so I, you know, my photographers and the people from Portugal that I'm there with are saying, you know, back off, you know, so I backed off and I got my photos anyway. But it turned out that my photographer, this was just a synchronicity that happens in my life. My photographer used to date this man's wife in high school. So we did a background search on him. What is he? He turns out he's Opus Dei. Not only is he Opus Dei, but he is the representative from Opus Dei that has installed himself in the Capitol building with the president of Portugal to advise him on what he can and cannot say about religions to the people. That's who this guy is, who stopped me from photographing, right? So then I did some background research on some of the authors, all of the authors actually, from Project 2025 that, you know, is not real popular here in the United States. And sure enough, 7 of the members are Opus Dei. So here we have again the Catholic Church behind the scenes. And I'm not even sure. In fact, I even doubt that the popes, our current pope or our last pope, even knew who these people were. I think this is a secret agenda by a group that has embedded itself in the Catholic Church that's behind these things. Honestly.
I agree. And we're approaching the time, and I want to be respectful of that. And I want to give you a chance to, one, talk about your new episode if you want to, and also what you have coming up. If you have any projects or trips coming up you want to promote.
Okay, yeah. The film is it's wonderful. It's covers the episode. It goes into the cave, shows the symbols and things that I use to compare with other symbols in Portugal and also in England and several other places. And I also interview the Kalunga, who were the descendants of the African slaves that escaped the churches from the slavers in the late 1400s, middle 1400s, and early 1500s, and escaped into Alto Paraíso and lived in the caves that the Templars had already built there. And then I go into the Amazon jungle in this episode, and I experience a spiritual healing, which took place, which was another miracle, another synchronicity along my Grail path. So that film is phenomenal because you're going to get to see the inner workings of one of the Amazonian tribes, the Hunniquin people, in that episode. And I've got a number of things I'm working diligently on my book right now, which is really keeping me kind of, I haven't been doing as many radio shows and things lately because I'm focused on this. But I'm going to be doing Conscious Life Expo coming up in February. and I'm doing my new. I'll be presenting my new research. I'm really excited about that. And also, I'll be showing clips from my second episode from the second film. So
very cool. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing with us. And I do enjoy our episodes, and hope you'll come back again.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Michael. I'd love to. Yeah. Yeah, when I get back from the UK from this next research trip that I'm doing, and I'm working on episode 3 right now, by the way. We are right now and actively working on episode 3, which is going to be another. I'm opening up some more stuff. I'll come back and we'll talk about that.
All right, look forward to it, and have a great adventure with a conscious life. And best of luck with episode 2. If it's anything like episode 1, I know it'll be great. And also want to take a moment and say I hope you get to feeling better. And
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I am gradually. I'm noticing that I'm much better than I was a couple of weeks ago. Oh my God. So I'm hoping that that's just going to stay in that positive path.
Yeah. And one thing I'd like to do as well, and then I'll end this pre-recorded episode, is from my heart to yours, thank you for your service to humanity and helping humanity grow.
Absolutely, Michael. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I made this commitment during my near-death experience in 1990, March 10th, 1990. And March 11th is when I came out of that, and I had committed 100%. And I have never second guessed. Well, I can't say I haven't second guessed it, because it's gotten pretty rough sometimes. But I have never, I've never faltered. I have never ceased from that path. I've never stopped moving towards that agenda, and that I see as a collective agenda, as being part of the evolutionary path of consciousness for mankind and for humanity. And, once you get on this path, you can't go back. It's not like you can just say, okay, I'm done, and step off. It doesn't work that way. So I do appreciate your acknowledgement, though, because it's not for everybody.
No, and I appreciate your bravery and stepping up and keeping on it.
Well, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And as we pointed out, stay tuned and make sure you follow and like these episodes, because you never know when she'll be back.
Right.
With that, good night, everyone.
Good night. We'll see you later, Michael. Have a great Sunday, by the way.